In 40 years on the bench, I had seen every kind of disrespect a courtroom could attract. I had stared into the faces of men who lied without blinking, people who stole from their own families, and defendants so angry they seemed ready to tear the room apart with their bare hands. I thought I understood arrogance. I thought I understood cruelty. But that rainy Thursday morning proved me wrong, because the woman who entered my courtroom was not loud or wild. She was calm, elegant, perfectly controlled. And somehow that made her cruelty even uglier. Her name was Isabella Vance. In this city, that name opened doors before anyone had to knock. The Vance family owned half the skyline, entire blocks of downtown real estate, the shipping terminals, and enough influence to make powerful people speak very softly when they were around them. Isabella had grown up in a world where rules existed for everyone else. Consequences were things that happened to ordinary people, not to her. When I reviewed the case file that morning, I read the charge twice to make sure I had not misunderstood it. Battery and disorderly conduct against a service member. The victim was Sergeant Marcus Hayes, 24 years old, recently returned from a 12-month deployment overseas. He had come straight from the airport, still in uniform, still carrying the dust of travel and service on his sleeves. He had not gone home first. He had not stopped to rest. He had gone to one place only, the Gilded Lily, the most expensive restaurant in the city, where his mother worked in the kitchen washing dishes. He had come there to surprise her with flowers and let her know that her son had made it home alive. That should have been a beautiful moment. Instead, according to 15 witness statements and the security footage I was about to see, it turned into something shameful. When the bailiff called the room to order, the courtroom fell completely silent. Then the doors opened and Isabella Vance walked in as if she were arriving at a fashion event rather than a criminal hearing. She wore a white coat that looked more expensive than most people's yearly income. Designer sunglasses covered her eyes even though we were indoors. 3 attorneys followed close behind her, their expressions polished and careful. She did not glance at the flag. She did not acknowledge the veterans seated in the gallery. She did not look at Sergeant Hayes, who sat quietly near the front, one hand resting on a cane, his posture straight despite the brace on his leg. She reached the defense table, checked the time on a diamond watch, and sighed as if this whole proceeding were an inconvenience interrupting her day. I took my seat and looked directly at her. "Miss Vance," I said, "remove your sunglasses." She lowered them slowly and stared at me over the frames with an expression so cold it almost felt rehearsed. "Is that really necessary, Judge?" she asked. "The lighting in here is awful." That one sentence told me everything I needed to know. She was not nervous. She was not embarrassed. She was annoyed. In her mind, the courtroom was not a place of accountability. It was just another room she expected to control. I ordered the lights dimmed and directed attention to the security footage from the Gilded Lily. The video began. The restaurant glowed with warm light, crystal glasses, white tablecloths, polished silver. At the center of it all sat Isabella Vance and 3 friends laughing over champagne, completely sealed inside their own world of privilege. Then the front door opened. Sergeant Marcus Hayes stepped in wearing a dusty camouflage uniform and carrying a small bouquet of carnations. He looked exhausted, but there was hope in his face. He was not there to be noticed. He was searching for the kitchen doors, trying to find his mother. As he passed Isabella's table, he accidentally brushed the back of her chair. The contact was so slight most people would not have reacted at all. But Marcus stopped immediately. He bowed his head and apologized. That should have ended it. Instead, Isabella stood up. The audio was clear enough for everyone in my courtroom to hear her say, "Do you have any idea how much this coat costs?" "You look filthy," Marcus answered respectfully. He said he had just come from the airport and was trying to see his mother in the back. Isabella laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an uncomfortable laugh. A cruel one. "The help?" She said. "Of course." Then she told him he was contaminating the room. She told him to leave. Marcus remained calm. You could see the discipline in him, the restraint. He simply said he had served his country and had every right to bring his mother flowers. That was when Isabella stepped closer. On that giant screen in front of a packed courtroom, we watched a woman raised in unimaginable wealth lean forward and spit directly into the face of a young soldier wearing the American flag on his chest. The room gasped. Marcus did not raise a hand. He did not shout. He wiped his cheek, looked at her for one long second, and walked past her toward the kitchen. When the video ended and the lights came back up, I turned to Isabella Vance, expecting at least the smallest hint of shame. Instead, she inspected her nails. "Are we done?" she asked. He ruined my appetite. At that moment, my anger stopped being personal and became something else. It became clear, focused, absolute. I told her to stand. She rose reluctantly, smoothing her coat as if appearances still mattered. I asked whether she understood the seriousness of what we had all just witnessed. She laughed. "Let's not be dramatic, Judge," she said. He invaded my space. I reacted. Then she compared Sergeant Hayes to vermin. She said people like him did not belong in places like the Gilded Lily. She called him government property. She said her family's money paid for his boots and his uniform. She even suggested that because he was poor and she was rich, she had the right to put him in his place. The gallery erupted. Veterans rose to their feet in fury. I struck the gavel and restored order, but inside I felt the weight of every word she had spoken. I looked at Marcus Hayes, still silent, still dignified, still refusing to let her drag him down to her level. And I looked at his mother in the back row, a small woman in a simple dress, clutching a tissue in both hands. Then I looked back at Isabella. "You seem to believe wealth gives you a different set of rules," I told her. "You believe money gives you the right to humiliate the people whose sacrifice protects the very life you enjoy?" She rolled her eyes. That was the moment I stopped seeing this as one spoiled outburst. I had already reviewed additional records before court began. Complaints quietly withdrawn, civil settlements, hushed incidents involving workers, staff, and service employees. A pattern, not a mistake. Not a bad day. A pattern. I informed her that this court would consider not only the act itself, but her history of behavior. Her attorney objected. I overruled him. Then I revealed the fact her legal team had missed. 6 months earlier in Colorado, Isabella had entered a deferred prosecution agreement after another assault incident. She had avoided a permanent record on one condition: no further violent or disorderly conduct for 12 months. By spitting on Sergeant Hayes, she had violated that agreement. For the first time since entering my courtroom, Isabella Vance looked afraid. Then I asked Sergeant Hayes one final question. "Have you been approached to drop this case?" He stood steadying himself with one hand. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. They offered me money this morning." "And what did you say?" He lifted his chin and answered in a voice the whole courtroom will remember for the rest of their lives. "I said my honor is not for sale, sir." That was the difference between them. One person had everything money could buy and still stood empty. The other had endured hardship, pain, and insult and still stood whole. So I sentenced her. I imposed the maximum fine on the disorderly conduct charge. But more importantly, for the battery against a uniformed service member, I sentenced her to jail time and ordered a lengthy term of community service at a veterans hospital after release. Not symbolic work, not paperwork in an office, real work, cleaning floors, assisting staff, serving people she had spent her whole life looking down on. When she heard the word jail, she panicked. She cried. She pleaded. She offered more money, more than before, but the courtroom had already heard enough. Justice is not something a rich family can purchase between lunch reservations. As officers stepped toward her, I gave the order. And for the first time in her life, Isabella Vance learned what it felt like to hear the word no and know that it meant something. That day was not memorable because a wealthy woman was punished. Courtrooms do that every day. It was memorable because everyone present was forced to witness a deeper truth. A uniform covered in dust can carry more honor than a closet full of designer clothes. A dishwasher can raise a hero. A young soldier can show more restraint in one insulted moment than a privileged heir shows in a lifetime. And money, no matter how much of it exists, cannot buy dignity once it has been thrown away. I have handed down thousands of sentences in my career, most faded with time, as cases do. But that one stayed with me, not because of the socialite, not because of the scandal, not even because of the outrage. It stayed with me because of Sergeant Marcus Hayes, because when he was insulted, he showed discipline. When he was bribed, he showed honor. When he was humiliated, he showed restraint. And in a room full of wealth, titles, tailored suits, and expensive lies, he was the only person standing there who looked truly powerful. That is what I remember. And that is why, after all these years on the bench, I can still say this with certainty. The strongest people in a courtroom are rarely the loudest, the richest, or the most connected. Sometimes they are simply the ones who refuse to sell their soul.